we are going to create our first application. We can do so by opening Android Studio and selecting this Start a New Android Studio project. First of all, in this window, we can see some templates. These templates are just some small applications that have some codes written to some level. For example, in this basic activity, you can see that we have a small button and also a menu above in here. We can see other templates in here, for example, a template for Google Maps. We have a template for navigation drawer. Don't worry about all of these because we will learn how to create all of these elements ourselves later on. Even we select this add no activity template, but the Android team are nice guys and they have provided us these templates. In a lot of these templates, you can see the word activity. Don't worry about this activity yet. If you remember from the content videos, I said that we are going to have an entire session which we will talk about activities and fragments. But for now, you can think of activities as different part of your application. For example, if your application has different pages, an activity is one of those pages. This definition is not accurate. It might not even be correct, but for now, we can think of an activity as a page of our application. In our first application, I'm going to stay with this empty activity which has no element. It's just going to create some files for us. But if you want to stay with add no activity, you can do so as well. Once again, later on we will see that how we can create all of these templates ourselves. Okay, let's select empty activity and let's hit next. In here, we need to provide some information about our application. For example, the name of our application. I'm going to change the name of my application to, let's say, Hello World, as it's a custom among developers to name their first project Hello World, just for no reason. The second part, you will define the package name for your application. This package name should be unique to every application that is being released into the world. Later on, when you want to publish your application to Play Store, your application will be identified with this package name. The convention in here is to provide the name of your website in backward. For example, my website is called makecode.org, so my package name is org.makecode. The name of my project. Don't worry if you don't have any website. If you don't, you can use something like com.example. Let's say com.example. The name of my project. But since I have a website, I'm going to use that in here. I'm going to say org.makecode. Once again, this package name should be unique to every application. After that, you need to define the path that you want to save your project. If you want, you can change this path by selecting this folder in here and select the path, but in here I'm not going to change that. After that, you can select the language that you are going to work with. Android applications can be written with Java language and also Kotlin language. In this course, we are going to stay with Java, but if you want, I am currently recording a new course about developing Android applications with Kotlin. Feel free to check that if you want, but let's select Java in here. After that, you need to define a minimum API level. This minimum API level in here means that how many older Android devices can install your application. For example, if you click on this drop down in here, you can see the list of different API levels. Right now, the minimum API level that I can select is 14, but I can go up to API level 29 or Android 10 to be precise. There is a balance in here. If you select your minimum API level very high, you can work with a lot of newer functionalities in Android, but fewer devices will be able to install your Android applications. For example, if I select API level 29, which is the latest version, only less than 1% of the devices can install my application. If I select something like 19, you can see that 95% of devices by this time can install my application. You as the developer should decide this balance. For this course, probably we are going to stay with API level 19 for most of our projects because I think it's a good balance and 95% is a good number. Leave this check empty for now. Also using Android X artifacts is mandatory since few months ago. We will talk about it later on in the course. Let's hit finish and let's create our first project. If it's the first time that you are creating your Android applications, this process can be very slow because Android Studio is going to download some stuff, for example, the Gradle file from internet. So for that reason, this process can be slow if it's the first time that you are creating your application. The first thing in here that is noticeable is that Android Studio have created two files for us, this activity main.xml file and this main activity.java file. These have been created because we have selected that empty activity template when we have created our project. Inside each of these files there are some codes. Once again, we can create all of these codes if we don't select that empty activity, but if you select that, you can have some codes written to some level. The other thing in here is this build pane down in here. This build pane in here will show the progress of building your Android applications. Whenever you want to run your Android application, whether that is in the debug mode, which we will be working in our entire course, or whether it's in the production level, this build in here will show the progress of building your Android applications. I'm going to minimize it for now, and let's talk about all the other stuff that we are seeing in here. First of all, let's talk about this project pane in here. I can minimize and maximize that. Also, top in here we have multiple options. For example, we have this project option. This project option will exactly show the structure of files on your system. For example, you can maximize every folder. If you want to have access to this main activity.java file, you can go to app folder, inside the sources, inside the main folder, inside the Java folder. You can see that we have a folder in here in which contains the main activity Java file. This is the exact hierarchy of files on our system. If you want to make sure of that, you can right click on the name of your project and select show in Explorer, this option in here. It will open the Explorer on your Windows. You can see that we have a Hello World project. Don't worry about the others. Inside this project, as you can see in the hierarchy, we have this app folder. Inside this app folder, we have a source folder, main folder, Java folder, org, makecode, hello world, and this is the Java file that we are seeing in here. So this project view will show the exact hierarchy of different files on your system. There is another view in here, and that's called Android view. We are going to stay with Android view for the most of this course because it's much more easy for eyes to follow. As you can see, we have this app folder. Inside that we have this Java folder, we have this package name, and inside that we have this main activity.java file. It's much more easy for eyes to follow different files. Also, beside this app folder, we have these Gradle scripts down in here as well. Before I talk about these Gradle scripts, I need to talk about the structure of every Android application. So in most Android applications, there are at least two different kinds of files. The layout files, which will define the looks of your application. The layout files in Android are called XML. You can see this activity main.xml file. If you click on that, you can see the layout of your application. Right now, it has only one simple text. The other part of every Android application is the Java file. If you are developing in Kotlin language, there are Kotlin files. The Java or Kotlin file in most cases will define the logic of your application. For example, what happens if you click on a button, or what to do with the user's inputs. All of those will be handled in the Java or Kotlin files. Beside the layout files and Java files in every Android applications, there might be some other files. For example, you may have some images and also some audio files as well. Those will be inside this resources folder, for example, inside the map folders. Right now we have an icon for our application, which is this simple Android icon. Other images or other files can be put inside this resources folder as well. Basically, this resources folder is for the static variables or static files on your application. So these are the three main components of every Android application. We have layouts, we have the Java file, and also we have the static files. Beside this, we have this manifest file inside the manifest folder. This manifest file will specify some general properties for your application. For example, you can see the icon of your application in here. Also, you can see the name of your application, which is Hello World in this case, and some other properties or features about your application. We will talk about this manifest file later on in the course, but for now, let's close it. We have all of these different files in every Android application, but for example, when you are going to download some application from the Play Store, you will see that we have only one file, one APK file. That's the final application that will be released. How are we going to generate that APK file? Well, in that case, this Gradle tool in here is going to be useful. Gradle is a build tool that will combine all of these files and other files and will create an APK file. No matter if you want to release your application or if you want to test your application on an emulator, you are going to need Gradle. For that reason, we are going to work extensively with Gradle. The other use of Gradle is that if you want to use other people's code in your project as well. For example, if you want to use YouTube Player in your project, you will add its dependency inside this build.gradle file down in here. Just by writing one line of code, Gradle will download the code for YouTube video player. As simple as that, Gradle will add the YouTube player code to your project, and after that you can use it. So, Gradle is a build tool that will handle the combination of every file and also other codes and will generate an APK file. We will talk about different Gradle scripts later on in the course. Okay, let's close all of these extra files. Okay, this was the project pane. We can minimize or maximize this pane from here. Let's minimize that and let's talk about other panes available in Android Studio. Down in here, you have some useful panes as well. For example, this to-do is very helpful when you are creating or when you are developing Android applications. To-dos are some works that you don't want to do at the time, but you don't want to forget those works. For example, inside this main activity, I can add a to-do as simple as that. I can say to-do, let's say complete this. It's just for the developers to remind themselves or other colleagues to do something later on. As you can see, this to-do has been added inside this to-do pane as well. If you want, you can check that. It says that it's inside the main activity. Later on, we will talk about how we can define to-dos and also other kind of comments. So this is one of the other panes. The other one is this terminal down in here. This terminal is like the command prompt in Windows, or let's say terminal in Linux or Mac, and it's very helpful if you are working with something like ADB or Android Debug Bridge. Later on, we will see the use of ADB in our projects. Also, it's very useful for working with SQLite databases. We will work extensively with this terminal in the database session. After that, we have this build tool in here. We have seen it when we have created our project. You can see the progress of every application when it's going to be built. In a lot of cases, there might be some problem when we build our project, and from here you can exactly locate the problem. After that, we have this logcat in here. It's going to be very helpful when we are going to debug our Android applications. In fact, we are going to work a lot with this logcat. Okay, let's minimize all of this for now. Above in here, we have some menus. We have file, edit, view, and all of these. We will work with most of them, I believe, in the course, but it's impossible to work with all of them. Also, there is one thing that I need to say in here. When you create your first application, you may get some warnings, for example, a rendering warning or some other kind of warning. If you get those, probably there isn't something wrong with your application. You just need to rebuild your project. For that, you can come to this build option in here and make your project once again, in case if you get some errors at the first time that you create your application. Sometimes newer versions of Android Studio can be buggy, and creating your project once again simply can solve your problem. Also, there is another option from here, from File. You can close your project and reopen it. That can be useful, or in some cases, you may want to invalidate your cache and restart Android Studio. So if you get those warnings or errors, you can try these 3 different ways in order to overcome the problem. There is one very useful tool that has been added to Android Studio recently in the past few months, and that's called Android Profiler. Let's add that to this pane down in here as well. We can add that by going to this View, Tool Windows, and Profiler. It's going to be helpful for monitoring the resources that your application is using. For example, the amount of RAM, the CPU that your application is using, or even the amount of network that your application is using. If we run our application, we can track the live amount of different resources that our application is going to use. Let's run our application and see it for ourselves. You can run your application by clicking on this green triangle from here, but before that, make sure to select the current app that you are working, and also beside that, make sure to select a device. In the previous video, we have created a virtual device, and we can see the list of different virtual devices available. I'm going to run my application on Pixel 3 API level 29 for no reason. Let's just run it. If we click on this build in here, you can see the build progress. I said that even if you are going to debug your application, or even if you are going to run your application at the production process, you can check the progress of build as well. As you can see, this emulator has been opened, and we will see our application in a few minutes. Also, from down in here, you can see the current status of running your application. Right now, it has created or built my application successfully, and it's waiting for the device to turn on. Also, if you check this logcat in here, you can see that there are a lot of things going on in here. We will be using this logcat extensively later on in the course for different debugging purposes. Let's minimize that. Also, if you open this profiler, you will see the live tracks of different resources that your application is using. Let's open our emulator. Right now, we have this simple application in which has a predefined text called Hello World. And if you want, you can check the amount of CPU or other kind of resources that your application is using. It's going to be helpful when you are not sure how much resources your application is using. Let's minimize that for now. If you want, you can close your application with this red button in here. You can stop it. And also, if you want, you can turn off your device by long pressing this turn off button. You can say power off and your device will be shut down. As you can see, we are getting some warnings in here. Right now, these are not important, but if you want to check them, you can click on this event log, and everything that happens since we click on this green triangle will be logged in here. Okay, let's minimize that, and let's switch back to our activity main.xml file. And we have a lot of options in here as well. Right now, you can see 2 different views of your application. This white one is called the design view, and this one in here is the blueprint view. There are some slight differences between these two. For example, if you have some invisible item inside your activity, that might not be visible inside this design view, but you can keep track of that inside the blueprint view. For now, I'm going to disable this blueprint view because we are not going to work with that just for now. In order to disable that, you can click on this stack icon and you can say just design. You can also minimize and maximize that by pressing this plus button in here. At the left panel in here, you can drag different elements, different user interface or UI elements. For example, if you want to add a button to your application, you can simply drag it like this. And this button will be added to your application. As you can see right now, because this element is clicked, we can see different attributes at the right panel. We have a lot of attributes for every user interface element. The most important one is this ID above in here. This ID is the unique ID of your element in which we will use it in order to have access to this button, for example, from inside our Java file. Later on, we will talk about that. If we click on our text view, you can see that we have different attributes as well. These are just a few attributes. If you want to check the list of all of the available attributes, you can click on this all attributes and you can see that there are a lot of them. We are going to get familiar with different UI elements in the UI session. We have that I think in 2 sessions from now. After the Java session, we will be talking about user interface in specific details. Also, when you are inside your XML file, you have 2 views, design view and text view. Design view is this view that we are working right now, and if we switch back to text view, you can see the exact value of every UI element in XML code. XML is a markup language. If you are a web developer, you know the concept of a markup language. HTML is also a markup language. Markup languages are just for defining some elements that user is going to see. For example, a button or text view. You can see that there are a lot of attributes in here that we don't know anything about them yet. We will be talking about them later on in the course. So there are 2 ways of defining UI elements. One is that you drag simple items, for example, a button to your design view, or from the text view, you can type it. You can see that we have a button in here. We can select the whole button and we can simply press delete and that button will be deleted. You can see that we no longer can see that. Also, if you don't have this preview enabled, you can enable it from here. Let's just press Ctrl Z in order to get back our button, and let's switch back to our design view. I'm going to define an ID for this hello text because later on inside my Java file, I'm going to identify that and I'm going to work with that. So by clicking on hello world, you can see the list of attributes. At the top, we have this ID. We can set an ID for our text view. Also, if you don't know the difference between a text view, edit text, and all of these, don't be worried. Text view is just a fancy way of saying a simple text. You can define the ID whatever you want. For example, in here, I'm going to say txt message. But notice that there are some conventions in here. You can't use spaces when you are going to define an ID. Also, beside that, you can't use some weird characters like a $sign or a hashtag sign. The other convention in here is that you type the first letter in lowercases. For example, this T in here is lowercases. And also after the first word, you type the first letter of the second word in capital letters. For example, we have this M in here. There are some just basic conventions among programmers. By pressing enter, we now have an ID for this hello world. If we switch back to our text view from down in here, you can see that for this text view, an attribute has been added, the ID attribute. So no matter what you do inside your text view or design view, they are basically the same. But as you can see right now, we have some warning for this button. The warning says that this button is not constrained to anywhere. That's because we are using this constraint layout for this whole XML file. Don't worry about this constraint layout yet. We have other layouts like relative layout and linear layouts as well. But for now, just know that when you are using constraint layout, which is the default case when you are creating an Android application, you need to constrain or chain your different elements to somewhere. For example, if I don't constrain this button to anywhere, it's going to be floating at the runtime. Because of the different screen sizes, we cannot know the exact position or exact place of this button. And right now, if we run our application, probably this button will be moved to the place 0 and 0, which is exactly this corner in our layout. In order to overcome this warning, we can simply add some constraints by clicking and dragging. As simple as that. I'm constraining this button to the both edges of my screen. Also for the top and bottom, I can constrain that as well. For the top, I'm going to constrain that to this text view. And for the bottom, I'm going to constrain that to the bottom of my screen. As you can see, whenever I add a constraint, an attribute will be added to this text view in here as well. Now we don't have that red warning. Also, it's worth mentioning that by default, when we have created this button, when we have dragged that into our design view, an ID has been added to it as well. The ID of this button is just button. We can change that if you want. For example, I can say btn let's say hello, or whatever you want, but in an XML file, the ID should be specific